Mini stamps come at a fabulous price point and are great for stocking stuffers, but are you at a loss for what to do with them? Today I share 2 unique ways you can use them and make those small stamps big. Welcome to another Color Connection with Amber. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss the next episode. Follow the link in the description down below to enter the Altenew Inspiration Challenge. This month is a year in review, so you can choose any of these images here for your inspiration. Here are the 2 mini stamp sets that we are going to use today. I have Altenew Whimsical Motif and Whimsical Tulip. These are great stamp sets. I love the mini stamp sets also for the sentiments. I find that these sentiments fit on so many different cards, especially when you're short on space. So I really look to my mini stamp sets for those small sentiments. Here I have Limestone Crisp Dye Ink, and I've just drawn 2 lines down the center of an A2 size piece of Savoy 100% cotton letterpress paper. I stamp my first 4 images on the lines that I drew, and then I start stamping in between those. I anchor the tip of the flower stem, and then I make sure that the flower head is going to fit into those 2 other images, and these fit perfectly with this design, you guys. I'll erase my guidelines, and the reason I chose Savoy 100% cotton paper is because I was thinking that I was going to use a fine liner to draw in a couple lines or some sketches. I ended up not doing that with this card, but I don't like to use fine liners on Neenah Classic Crest so much. Here I'm going to start coloring with the Greenfields Artist Markers, and I'm starting off with Evergreen, then I'll move to Forest Glades, and then Frayed Leaf. So sometimes I find when I draw on Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80 pound or the 110 pounds, sometimes the inks bleed a little bit. They kind of feather out. But more than that, I find that it's really challenging to shade with a pencil on smooth cardstock like that. So I like to use this Savoy Letterpress because it's got a little bit of tooth to it. If I'm going to do a watercolor project, that's perfect too because there's tooth to the watercolor paper. So that's also really nice to shade on and also use fine liners on. So that's why I chose this particular paper. Now, because this is 100% cotton paper, it's kind of thick, it's got a little bit of tooth to it. I didn't have any issues coloring on it at all. It actually took the ink really well. I do wonder whether or not it's a thirsty paper because it's, again, cotton. So I wonder if it uses maybe a little more of your alcohol ink than the Neenah Classic Crest Solar White would. I didn't really notice any kind of difference when I flipped it over and looked at the ink on the back of the page. But it blends beautifully on this paper, so I thought that was a nice paper to use. Here I have the Summer Afternoon Artist Markers, and I'm starting off with Warm Sunshine, and then I'm going to bring in Caramel Toffee to add a little bit of shading, and then Paper Bag, which is the darkest color in this series. Then I'll go back to Caramel Toffee, blend that out a little bit, go back to Warm Sunshine, and then once I get to the tip, I'm going to use Buttercream, but I'll start at the tip and flick back into the colors that I've already laid down. I find it's much easier to get that sharp point on the tip of the petal if you work in reverse and flick towards what you've already colored. So here I'm starting with the darkest color, Paper Bag, then Caramel Toffee, then I'll do Warm Sunshine, and then Buttercream. And I colored this in very much of an assembly line kind of style. I put down all of the darkest color all the way around all the flowers, then I came in with the second color. So it was very much an assembly line, and I didn't have any problems blending the colors that way. I didn't need to do one flower at a time, and I felt like that was a much more efficient process. So here we have the finished coloring here, which I think looks really cool. I like the gray outline of the stamp. I think there's enough that it adds structure to the flowers, but not so much that you notice that it still feels like a no-line project. So here I pulled out one of the even smaller stamps from this mini set. There's a couple different just small clusters of dots. And so I pulled that out because I wanted to add a little bit more texture to this piece. So first I used it at the tips of the tulips, and then I'm putting it in between the tulips. And then I'll add it in the very center where the green leaves are as well. I didn't mention when I was coloring the leaves, I colored all of the leaves in one direction first and then went back and colored all of the leaves that were going in the other direction. So all the leaves on the right first and then all the leaves on the left. And I just colored right over the previous leaf. I didn't try and avoid coloring on top of the leaf that was already colored. Just color right on top of it and you'll have a good result. And you can see how they overlap each other there. I think it adds a really nice look and some depth there. So there's all my dots, and now we need to add the sentiment. So there's one sentiment in this set. It's a little tiny little high sentiment. So I went ahead and cut a piece of Neenah Classic Crust Solar White. That's the 80 pound, and I just used a circle stacking die. And I also cut it out of black cardstock as well, and I popped that up on some foam squares. And here's a sneak peek of the next card that we're going to do. I did end up adding some black splatter to this with some jet black ink spray, and I just really love how this card turned out. Here I wanted to show the close-up so you could see the texture of the paper. You can see it right in that shadow of the high die cut. It's a beautiful texture on this paper. Okay, moving on to the next card, we are going to embellish this small stamp to make it stand out a little bit more. So I'll start off by stamping the Whimsical Motif stamp set, and this is not A2 size. This is the same Savoy 100% paper. This is the permanent black ink, which is Copic safe or alcohol marker safe. And this paper is 4 3/4 by 3.5 inches. So it's just a little bit smaller so that I can put it on a green piece of cardstock and kind of mat it so that it stands out a little bit more. So I'm just going to stamp this once. I know it's not fully stamped and it's not a great stamping, but that's not a problem. I left my stamp in my Misty because I want to stamp it with the Obsidian Black after I'm done with the coloring, because I really love the super, super dark ink of the Obsidian Pigment Ink. So that's my plan from the get-go. So I've just added a little border here because I do want to add an inked line around that, and I find it much easier to start with a pencil. And here I have the Altenew Fine Liner pen set. This is the O2 pen, and that's the thickest pen aside from the brush marker that's in the set. I'm just going to outline the stamp. Now, when you're outlining a stamp like this or any other kind of image, this is called an aura in Zentangle. Here I'm just really doodling though. I'm not really doing a Zentangle pattern. But when you aura like this or outline or echo an image, you want to make sure that you have the same distance between your pen line and this stamped line. Kind of like when you fussy cut, you're going to have a much better result if you have the same amount of paper edge around the stamp. It's just a much more finished and polished look. So you want to try and keep that same distance between your line and the stamp if possible. So you can see I added a few more echo lines, so I'm just echoing the shape of the stamp, and now I'm starting to darken in those areas. Now you can see in this Whimsical stamp that the main outline of the stamp is pretty thick and dark, whereas the detail parts, the stamens of the flower and things like that, are thinner. So I wanted to mimic that in my doodles here, and so I'm filling in some of the areas with the black ink to add that contrast. This is going to turn this stamp into more of a focal point as opposed to just a small stamp that could get lost on a card. It adds a little more oomph to it and makes it more dynamic and more dramatic. So I'm just going to do the same thing with the center of the flower here. I'll just darken the outer edge, draw another one, and darken that in a little bit. I filled in some of those dots. And then I'm just going to round the corners of my outline here, and you're going to see that this is also going to add some drama and some extra contrast to the image. It just helps to draw the eye into the image, having that extra contrast, and it's so easy. Such a simple little thing to add that makes a big difference. So I'm just going to fill in. Now this is actually the stamped image, so I'm filling in these small lines on the stamped image, and that helps to kind of make everything cohesive. So now I felt like it needed a couple friends, so I'm going to draw some little bugs here. This is a pattern that I made. It's called Gumbug. It reminds me of two different things. It reminds me of mimosa trees. So you're going to see I'm going to add some really thin hairs here. So this is the 005 pen. And I'm going to just add some flicks, some lines, and you want to curve your lines, have some straight, some curved. You want to vary the height of the line. Some should be long, some should be short. And then just add a dot at the end of each one of those lines. So these little spiky tendrils kind of remind me of the flowers from a mimosa tree, but they also remind me of the seed pods from gum trees, sweet gum trees, you know, those like spiky balls. It reminds me of that, and that's why I called it Gumbug. They're just little guys that I sometimes add to my Zentangle and whatnot, and I thought it would be cute with this flower. So here I'm going to draw a stem, and I'm going to put one on the stem, and it's going to make it look like the weight of the bug is weighing down this little stem that's coming up from the flower. And it's just going to add another focal point, and it'll give us 3 images on this composition, which will help to balance it out and look more even. Now, when I fill in these gum bugs, I leave a highlight in the center. So I start at each corner of the gum bug and bring the strokes in toward the center, but I'm careful to leave a little white space in there so it has just a touch of sparkle. Here you can see I'm flicking away from myself. I find that to be easier, and I'm turning the card so that I can get a good curve on each one of those flicks. I switched over to the 01 pen so that I can make larger dots, whereas the little small lines are made with the 005 pen. So I'm just going to darken up these little dots down here because those were initially made with the 005. Look at that ant. So I'm sitting here drawing bugs, and this ant crawls underneath my glass mat. I'm in Southern California, and we have had crazy ants this year, but I'm surprised to see this one really. So I think I still have the 01 pen, and I'm just reinforcing my pencil border that I had. Now that line looks so thin compared to the dramatic lines that I have on the flower, so I will go back in and add several more lines around that. So I'm going to color this flower too because it's looking a little boring with just the black and white, and I'm doing the same process. So I started with caramel toffee and then brought in the paper bag, but I'm using the same color. So the summer afternoon and the green fields markers. This is the warm sunshine, and I'm just flicking it from the base of the petal up towards the top, making sure that I leave some white space at the top. And then I'll bring in the buttercream from the tip of the petal back down towards the color that I've already put down. The color scheme that I chose for my projects today was from the February 2020 Inspiration Challenge. And I picked that because I started with the design team in March, so I missed January and February. So I thought it would be fun to go back and grab those, and then I'll have a full year of all of the colors. And it's been really great. I have really enjoyed my theme for the video design team in being able to use the inspiration color schemes, because color is very much one of the main things that inspires me more than anything else in my artwork is color combinations, mixing colors, experimenting with colors, coming up with weird colors. Like if you guys saw the last Altenew video on my channel, the 7 reasons I love slimline cards, it had the koi fish watercolor card and then also the layer stamped card where I did some green flowers and teal flowers. So I've really enjoyed being able to share color themed inspiration on the channel, along with a lot of techniques. I have really gotten into watercolor, I would say, over the last several months, and you guys seem to be enjoying this, but let me know if there's other techniques that you want to see in the new year. Is there anything in particular you would like to see from the color connection videos? Make sure you comment down below and let me know, and I'll add it to the wish list of ideas. So coloring is almost done, and I can just really see that this border does not have enough oomph. The flower is really standing out. I went ahead and re-stamped the flower with the Obsidian Pigment Ink because I wanted to make sure I had a deep, dark outline. And now we have to beef up the border a bit. So I'm going to grab the 02 pen, and really I probably could have gone with the brush pen and gotten a thicker line, but what I decided to do is outline this a few times. So I'm not trying to hit the same line every time. I want it to look like multiple lines. I want it to have that sketchy feel, but I really do need to beef it up because it looks out of place being so dainty compared to that bold stamp that we have. I'm inking up the Hello sentiment from Whimsical Motif with the Obsidian Pigment Ink, and I'll just stamp that more than once because of the texture of the paper. And to finish off this card, I'll add a couple tropical forest enamel dots, and here you can see the finished card. And I love these little guys. You'll have to let me know what you think of these little guys down below. Here are the two cards together, so there's definitely many ways that you can use your small stamps. Again, they're a really great price point, and so I have a whole collection of these little stamps, and these would be perfect for a gift basket or a gift set for a friend that you would like to introduce to card making. Get them a few of these with maybe a mini ink cube set, and they're good to go. If you guys learned something new today or got value out of this video, please consider subscribing and hit that like button for sure. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you soon with more inspiration.